and she ended up going into the bathroom and locking herself. And she's like, "Why did you do that?" I'm like, well, I wanted to hang out with my friend. She had to obviously come out eventually.
Hey guys, this is Agnibarna.
And Maira,
Welcome to the Hidden Coconuts podcast.
the show that dives deep into the lives of us coconuts, brown on the outside, white on the inside.
Or in other words, those of us who identify as both South Asian and North American, juggling two identities, contemplating how they coexist.
If you empathize, or you were just in the neighborhood, stick around and let's get cracking our inner coconuts.
The first transgender news anchor of Bangladesh who will be attending New York Fashion Week this year as a guest appearance. It's great that she's advocating for something that's been so heavily stigmatized for years, but before it wasn't. It's after white people came and attacked us that it became a bad thing.
Right. And my whole life, I've kind of been taught that the whole idea of being transgender or even homosexual was just really bad. So I can imagine it being much worse in a South Asian culture because it's just some topic that's pretty much taboo. So it takes a lot of guts to go out there and represent yourself, but also knowing that you're carrying an image of your country with you.
Yeah, for sure. She will be representing the entirety of Bangladesh when she's there. So, yeah, that's exactly what you said. Not only is she this figure for so many people like her, but she's also representing an entire nation.
Hmm. That's crazy. So, sorry, what's her name again?
Tasnuba Shishir, or her full name is Tasnuba Anand Shishir.
Wow. Yeah, I have to say, all the culture and media representations I got, even from Pakistan, I've never seen a transgender person there or anyone who declared outright that they're homosexual. So this is a really big thing. The fact that even in her country she was a newscaster, I feel like that's already super big too.
Yeah, and she's really advocating and fighting for it, which can really help others who may not feel comfortable in their bodies or who may not attend to heteronormative approaches to society in Bangladesh. So she's definitely has the guts, and we respect and salute her for that.
And clearly enough, the way she looks or her sexual orientation, that doesn't affect who she is as a person. She's still a newscaster, and if she's a newscaster, that means that she's really good at her job. So that kind of contradicts that idea we may have in our head that minorities are inferior and just not good enough.
Yeah, for sure. And just overall, people have so many opinions about all of these things. Just growing up in Canada, I kind of grew up thinking it's normal to have two moms or two dads. But sometimes when you go back to Bangladesh, especially when there you notice we call them hijras or the third gender on the streets, just the comments or the way people treat them, that's a huge shocker for me because that's not the environment I grew up in here. And even now taking all my psychology and sociology courses where we cover these things and we actually look at it from a scientific approach or a social science approach, you just want to kind of push all that knowledge into the brains of the ignorant because they're looking at it through a very completely subjective, negative, egocentric view.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And as somebody who's not that knowledgeable about psychology and things like that, I could add to that that the way they see them is also not okay because they simply just don't know the people, right? You're taking a glance at somebody and deciding you know who they are and what they're about, and acting upon that is also not okay. But even having those thoughts, you cannot believe those because they have no evidence.
Yeah, for sure. So I can't speak from my own experience, but if anyone listening who identifies as a member of the LGBTQ plus community, we are your allies and we would love to talk with you if you want and share your story on our podcast. The Google Docs is always open.
We see you.
Also, on the note of New York Fashion Week, I was just thinking about the mixing of the cultural clothing of Western world and South Asian world. Because the post I saw of Tasnuba Shishir, where she's invited to New York Fashion Week, she's wearing a sari. So not your typical Chanel dress.
Yeah, no, I first have to say this, but South Asian fashion is amazing. They know what they're doing. So
Yeah.
yeah, and I remember like I would sometimes wear, even in like first grade, cultural clothing to school because everyone just loved it and I'd get so many comments. And like, sure, I was scared the first day, but because everyone was like, whoa, like that's so neat, I really took pride in it. And the fact that it's happening at Fashion Week and it's international, it shows again that it's not the culture that seems to pose the problem, but it's the people somehow. Can you relate to that?
Yeah, for sure. I came to Canada when I was 6, so that Bangladeshi patriotism was still fresh in my mind. And I was the same with you. I'd wear like summer kameezas to school, and on the last day of first grade, I remember I wore a lehenga, and my teacher was fascinated. He called over the teacher from next door and he was like, "Look what she's wearing. Agnibarna, stand up." So I stood up, kind of like did a little spin, and like the teachers loved it.
I'm glad.
And it was like such a cool thing. Even in second grade, when we'd have like regular potlucks, I would always bring like kheer in as my dish, and my teacher would be waiting for that kheer. But I don't know how or when it happened, but after you hit like a certain age, you just become self-conscious and you feel like you need to blend in. And I don't know if it happened to you, but for me, after like I hit a certain age, maybe like 16 or 17, I hate that it happened to me, but I get nervous and scared, even just because of what others might react if like they see me out and about in my cultural clothing.
I can relate to that, and it's just really unfortunate. So I'm sorry that that happened. But I think as children, we have role models who are really encouraging of being accepting of others and like embracing differences.
Because in a way, we're all kind of whitewashed. We're white on the inside. So it comes to the point where we debate on whether we should also show traits of being white on the outside as well. Do we want to like adapt the Western wardrobe? Do we want to adapt the Western vocabulary, what they do, the occupations? Or do we just want to
Definitely.
accept that, okay, we might be like white on the inside, but we're still like, we have like a racial identity of our own, like a culture of our own, wardrobe of our own. So it's always like a battle. Like, do you want to go on one side? Do you want to go the other side? Or do you want to be in the middle?
I feel like elementary school was a good time for that reason because the teachers we had were so kind and like I could think of them as friends. But
Sorry,
I
I
hear
have
you
to make
making
that
sounds.
noise. I have stories about my second grade teacher.
Uh-oh. Okay, well then clearly that means it's not the case for everyone, which is also sad. But I feel like as we get older, it gets worse. But going
Yes.
back, do you want to share your story about your second grade teacher?
Okay, so like I didn't realize the impact she had on me until I started university and taking my psychology courses. So back in the second grade, I didn't think anything of it. I just thought my teacher was so cool and she clearly had her favorites. And I also wanted to be in that group. And when I started studying psychology as my degree, and like looking through all the notes and all about developmental psychology and how little things in your childhood affect who you are today. I don't know if like she was completely outright racist, but she definitely had something against me and this other girl in my class. We were both from Bangladesh. She had something against us. And I remember one time, like I was very shy. I've always been shy. So she would encourage all of us to be like, okay, you can call me by Miss this, Miss X. Well, let's call her Miss X. Miss X. And that's how I want you to approach me. Be comfortable. Tell me, Miss, I need this. Miss, I need that. Just be comfortable calling me whenever you need something. So
Mhm.
it took me 3 months to like kind of approach her. I never called anyone by like their names or anything. It's just so weird for me and kind of like very vulnerable. But one time I kind of brought up the courage and I approached her and I was like, Miss X, I need to speak to you about something. She was like, holy smokes. She was like, what are you doing out of your seat, young lady? Like, you're not supposed to be here. And like, she just said a bunch of like stuff, and everyone in the class was like laughing. But then,
Seriously?
and I felt humiliated. Like, I didn't like know what to expect of it, but I was humiliated. I went back to my seat, but then 2 seconds later, a white girl goes up and she's like, Miss, I need this. And she's like, oh, of course, sweetheart. So I didn't think of anything of it back then. I just thought like, I didn't even know what I thought about it. But now looking back, that was kind of like my first experience with racism. And that's also a reason why today I am as reserved or as scared to like kind of approach people, or my social anxiety kind of started back then. So I don't want to be, but I'm very hesitant and very aware of like what other people might think of me. And it's bad. I'm working on it. But now that I acknowledge it, I realize that, yeah, I've had lots of implicit racial stuff happen. And that's kind of shaped me to be who I am today.
That's really unfortunate. And as a child as well, I was, I guess, one of those people pleaser children, but also
Mhm.
like I was afraid of making anyone upset or being called out. Like I absolutely hated it. If a teacher said my name for something, my heart would skip a beat. So the fact that you like mustered up the courage after like months to do that and then you were shot down all of a sudden, that is detrimental. Like as a child, that would be kind of traumatizing in its own way.
And yeah, no, I just completely lost my train of thought.
Similar things have happened to me, only like not in elementary school, in high school. And I just think about it, and like the way that some teachers have spoken to me is just unacceptable because
Really?
there is no way they would be speaking that way to Kylie.
So
The
like a
stereotype.
generic name. We're not like calling out specifics, are we? Because
Oh
yeah.
no, no.
Okay.
Kylie's like the pretty sporty girl or whatever that can literally get away with anything because everyone loves her. It's not like we get to choose who we are in that respect, right? And like I don't think we need to like have a certain personality in order for people to like us. We're all just common high school kids. It shouldn't be that hard.
Yeah, for sure. And it's common in like any kind of field where like popularity and that upper vote matters. Like people want you to be a certain way. People want you to like follow certain rules and be this person. And if you're not, you are shut down, you're not taken seriously, or you're not just given like that special time of the day, even if your work or your talent is more earned or hard worked. This is completely random. We were just talking about this in one of my classes. So I'll just use this as an example. And about like steroids. If you like take steroids and you bulk up and you're like running faster and faster, you just have like that upper hand. You are making it look better. You are who they want to be. While in the background, there are so many people who are working so hard. And like, even if it's gifted or God given, you're a fast runner. They're trying so hard, but they just can't make it to that level because they didn't get that boost, like unnatural boost.
Exactly, like this whole privilege thing, but it makes you feel so not good enough or worthless, and it's a really hard feeling to recover from. So I think what I personally had to keep telling myself is that like my worth doesn't depend on others, and it's just an unfortunate fact that this exists. You can't
Yeah.
really do much about it.
I think after a certain point, you just kind of accept that you can't change those who don't want to be changed. So if I'm going to be judged anyways, might as well be judged doing something I like.
Ooh, I like that. Can I quote you on that?
Go for it.
Okay.
Because whatever I do, you can't like please every single person. If I dress up a certain way, like wear a sari outside, white people will give me looks.
Yep.
If I dress up in jeans or like wear my I love crop hoodies. So I love like wearing those like crop hoodies. I've never experienced it, but I have a feeling I'd get some eyes from like conservative brown people. So like if you're trying to please anyone, you're trying to find that middle ground, you'll never be happy. So whatever you do, there will always be people judging. Just I've learned to like kind of just put them in the back.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you're able to do that. That is a good point. And like I know with me too, it's exhausting if you're trying to please people. So like just making sure that at the end you're satisfied with your actions, I really feel like that's what should matter.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm not hurting anyone. I'm just here, just
Just
trying
being
to.
you. And my dad actually, when I was in one of my lowest points, he kept telling me this thing. He would always be like, what other people think is none of your business. And like at first I was like, well, I mean, yeah, it is. Like they're talking about me, but really it doesn't matter. And once you start acting upon that and just like realizing it that it really doesn't matter, you feel so free.
You were saying that you thought your parents were really strict growing up.
Yeah, it was like really unfair to me. That's what I thought because everyone at school, they would just be like hanging out together after class and it would be like so spontaneous too. Like they would ask their friend's mom, like, "Hey, like, can I come over?" Or "Mom, can I go to my friend's house?" They'd be like, "Yeah, sure." But for me, if I wanted to meet my friends, I had to go to my parents. I had to practically beg them And a lot of the times they would say no because they weren't comfortable. And their reason was always that they're from a different culture. We don't know their parents. We don't know what they're like. But yeah, as like a 9-year-old, like I didn't really care about that. I just wanted to have a good time with my friends.
Right.
So yeah, it was hard. We had to get them on the phone. And one time I remember I tricked my mom into having to talk to my friend's mom on the phone because she wouldn't do anything. And she ended up going into the bathroom and locking herself. And she's like, "Why did you do that?" I'm like, "Well, I wanted to hang out with my friend." She had to obviously come out eventually. And then she dealt with it. She's like, "Okay, like fine, but never again." But yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, just in general, like I felt like it was really hard to do what other people could do so easily here because it just didn't align with their cultures and values. So that definitely played a role in me perceiving them to be strict. But
Mhm.
now I feel like we've come a long way and we're both learning about each other's cultures and our wants and what's right and wrong and kind of meshing the two together. But it's a piece of work for sure.
Yeah, I totally understand. For me, my story is a little bit twisted because I thought my mom was strict, but I think I kind of like based her on what I saw of people of my ethnic group, like of other moms within the ethnic group. So I thought like my mom was the same in that sense.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, I totally get like being scared to like ask her to go somewhere or ask her for like specific things. I always thought like she has like this certain image or the way she wants me to be specifically. So because of that, I was always like a little bit guarded. I wanted to be like this ideal person for her. But then once when I was 16, she just comes up to me and she just goes, "You don't go out much, do you?" And I was like, okay. So yeah, we had this like heart to heart at that time. And I realized that the image I'm kind of like made up of her, like the way she is or like how strict she is, it was solely based on stereotypes. So I think that's a thing about having immigrant parents is the communication gap.
Yeah, no, that's so interesting because like you live in the same household and everything, but still it's the expectations that are from the media that just get to you.
Yeah, definitely. You see those Instagram posts, people have like hashtag growing up brown, and they tell their stories of like how their parents are like this. They sneak their boyfriends into their house because they don't want their parents to see. But
Yeah,
that's like solely stereotype and not how all parents are.
that's true when you think about it. Hard to believe in the moment though.
Mhm. It's true that sometimes there are like the cultural gaps, and parents can sometimes kind of come out a little more conservative than you, but it's all about communication when you think about it.
You're very right. And honestly, I've seen how much of an impact that has on me and my family. Because, okay, I'm not the only child in my household. I have a sibling, and it's crazy because we're so different. And I don't know how, but the way that this culture has impacted us is really different. So I find myself relating more to my parents and their values, whereas my brother, maybe not so much. And we've had so many discussions, so many nighttime conversations that last hours, trying to understand each other, trying to make sense of what's right and wrong. And because of that, like I can see like both my parents' perspective and my brother's perspective changing. The point being though, like it's really hard to know what to follow, you know what I mean? Because you have to
Right.
look and
Yeah.
understand that it's not one culture that's necessarily correct.
Yeah, definitely.
I think my parents are definitely more conservative, and honestly, that's just how I like to live my life too. Like I see value in it, but at times there's definitely things where I'm like, okay, that doesn't make sense. That's just like what you were taught growing up, but I don't see the logic behind it.
Mhm.
Has that ever happened to you?
So I just had this like recent encounter with my mom, which was usually she is pretty liberal, just like a heads up. She's very open-minded, like I mentioned before. She's not the strict person I kind of made her out to be. But there are definitely, like you said, some things that you just want to take a step back and say, no, that's not it.
Mhm.
And that kind of happened to me like a couple of days ago. So I experienced social anxiety and I get like all the leg shaking, palpitation, hand sweating. I get all of that. Sometimes she doesn't understand like the severity of it just because it's internal. And I've gotten really good at maintaining it. So since she hasn't experienced it herself, she's not always like sure like the severity of it. And that kind of happened a couple of days ago when I went out and I kind of froze, like completely froze because COVID, I was locked up for like most of the time. So this was my first time in a restaurant in a few quite some time. So I froze because I wasn't so used to seeing all the people. And then it took me some time to like just get used to it. So I was telling my mom that this happened and she just kind of looked at me like, what? So that,
Right.
yeah, it was at that point I kind of like understood that this is just something that she just won't understand. So the question is, do I want to work on trying to make her understand, or do I want to accept that she just won't understand this? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a dilemma for sure because like it takes a lot of effort to try to make somebody understand, and we don't know if eventually that's going to happen or not.
Is it worth
Um,
it?
exactly.
Mhm.
Should we like just work on, I don't know, ourselves and how to cope with it, or try to get people to understand? And like, I think another key piece is the fact that mental health and mental health issues aren't really talked about on that. Like,
Mhm.
at least for in my parents' culture, Pakistani culture, like that mental illness and stuff is just not a thing. So
Yeah.
slowly, like over time, it's getting more recognition. But I used to struggle a lot more with like anxiety problems. And I would tell my parents, like, I'm scared. And their answer would be, don't be scared. Okay,
Yeah.
like that's just not helpful.
Yeah. To kind of like go off of what you said, well, in my case, my mom acknowledges that mental health is like a thing. She's dealt with mental health illnesses herself. But her thing is, how can children have mental illnesses? Or like, how can like a young person have depression? You know what I mean? They
Yeah,
just can't wrap their mind around like, what does a child have to be upset about when it's so much more than just being upset?
exactly. There's biological factors, social factors. It really depends on the individual, but it's more than possible.
So, how do you feel just being grown up the way you have been and just knowing that you've experienced anxiety? And have you like been able to like cope with it better now? Been able to communicate it better with your parents? Able to explain it to them?
So thank you for asking. I think we've come a long way. I feel like at one point they realized that like, okay, this isn't normal. Like people don't get this anxious or nervous. And I was just like having breakdowns very often. And eventually like I started getting help and they recognized that that was necessary. And that's when I guess like more of the medical or the diagnosis part came in. And I guess that's what made it more clear to them, like it's an
Mm-hmm.
actual issue. So yeah, we started to seek help then, and my aunt is actually a doctor. So when we visited Pakistan, she said that okay, like I have this friend who is also a doctor, like a psychiatrist. Why don't you go see her? So because she was like trained in that field, even in that Pakistani culture. So like I know I said that they didn't really recognize mental illnesses, but I think looking over time, they are recognizing it now.
Mm-hmm.
So I talked to her and she's like, yeah, like you should definitely think about cognitive behavioral therapy. My aunt, she pushed my dad. She's like, hey, okay, make sure she gets the help when you get back to Canada because like she needs it. Like don't forget. So it's with their help that I was able to get somewhere. But yeah, it's just at the beginning before it all, the problem was not recognizing that it's a problem. And
Mm-hmm.
the way my parents grew up and what they learned, that's what influenced the way that I had to deal with problems before.
Yeah, I totally understand. I'm sorry you had to go through that, but it sounds like you're doing a lot better, which is always great. Do you think communicating your struggles kind of helped a lot with that?
Definitely, I feel so much better and I'm very thankful for that. I also notice more of openness in my family now that we're on the same page, and same with other family members. If they're ever going through a struggle or something, like, we know that we have to communicate with them and they have to communicate with us.
I don't know if like other coconuts have experienced this, but you want to share certain things, but at the same time, you want your parents to like take it in a specific way. You want them to see it from your point of view. And that's why sometimes you're hesitant to talk to them because what if they take it a different way? What if they kind of like have their own opinions that go against yours? You know what I mean?
For sure, and especially thinking of how different our values and beliefs might be. I feel like for me, over time, it's gotten easier to talk to my parents just because I feel like the older I grow up, the more that I kind of connect with them in terms of
Mhm.
what they value. Like, that's just a personal opinion, but I totally get it being difficult.
Yeah, I totally understand. Like, it kind of does get easier because for me, it was more like I'm grown up now and I'm taking psychology and I'm learning like all these things. So my mom like wants to come to me for information, like wants to learn about like how things have impacted me throughout my life because she never got to like go that deep into my head. So, yeah, I've noticed that it's an age thing. After a certain age, it kind of becomes easier, or like you kind of find your voice. So it's like more like you're able to take the initiative to do something about what you want.
Uh-huh, for sure. And I'm really glad that things are looking good for you in that sense. And yeah, just kind of bouncing off of that. For me, yes, as we talked about, there's this culture clash, this battle. I think nowadays my battle is more against this Canadian or Western culture. So I feel like I relate to my parents so much, and honestly, they're my best friends. Like, I go to them for everything. I vent to them. I trust them more than anyone, and I share so much with them. They're basically like, you know how people in high school like share secrets with their friends or like
Yeah.
go out and stuff? Like, that's what I do with my parents. And that's because I feel like I can be me because they accept me, they understand me, and I don't think that I could get that from people in the society just because the values are so different.
Yeah. Do you just kind of see yourself as like a different entity from the rest of everyone around you? Like just feel alienated or that you don't fit in? And has your mind kind of gone to the point where you think you'll always kind of feel alienated? And do you like accept that or do you like want to change that?
Definitely. I think that no matter how hard I try, I don't think I could ever become like homogenous. You know what I mean? I can
Yeah.
never be like the rest of people. And once you accept that, in a sense, it does take a stress off of you because there's no point of trying. And honestly, I think that that's not even a good goal to have
Yeah.
because, you should be who you are. And it's not about the majority being correct or anything.
You've reached the end of another episode of The Hidden Coconuts. Thanks for listening.
Be sure to check out our Instagram at The Hidden Coconuts for bloopers, more of our wandering thoughts, and a chance to be a guest on our show. We love to discuss and tackle everyday coconut quandaries, so stay tuned, and we'll see you on top of the coconut tree soon.